So how do you break through to those businesses making 3 million, 5 million, $10 million is not within the same circle, because the referrals you're going to get from those clients are going to be this similar type of referral. And that's the issue we saw, is like when we started, we were getting a lot of referrals, but we were getting a lot of referrals from the same size. So clients or companies that we were supporting that, let's say, were 5 people, 5 users or 10 users, we were getting a lot of 10 user referrals. So how do we scale them? How do we get those 20 users, 30 users, 50 users? Is by going out there and networking with those type of businesses. That's when we realized that if we really wanted to grow and raise the bar for us, we needed to get out there and create a system.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the MSP Pipeline. I'm your host, Kyle First. Joining me today is Fernando Perez, the co-founder and COO of KairosIT, a company with teams across South Florida, Bay Area, Colombia, Philippines. And today we're going to get into scaling through marketing and what MSP sales actually look like today and what it takes to grow beyond referrals. Fernando, really excited to have you on today. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Kyle.
Of course. You know, I want to start with before Kairos became what it is today, because a lot of MSP owners listening right now are stuck in that early phase. You started in the trenches, fixing computers, taking whatever work you could get, and eventually made the decision to go all in on the MSP model. So let's start with this. What first pulled you into the tech world?
So, I started like most MSP owners started. I think it's, we had a passion for IT, had a passion for fixing computers. That's how I started back in 2008, 2009. Quickly realized that if I wanted to make some real money, I needed to think like a business, right? And that realization came to me in probably around 2014, right? I remember running into a guy that was running an MSP down here in Miami, and he was telling me about the recurring revenue and how he was, making money by being proactive instead of reactive. And I thought of myself back then just running around, putting out fires. I was actually doing a lot of residential back then. I had a few clients that were business, right? And I was making good money for my age. Looking back, I remember, I think I was making, $4,000 a month or something like that, which, was good money. I was maybe I had like 20 years old. I was 20 years old or so. So, but that basically changed the way I looked at the business. And that's when I decided to become an MSP. I fired a lot of the companies that I had that didn't want to turn into the MSP model. And I decided to go all in into the MSP model, the recurring revenue.
Yeah, definitely. And when did you realize this could become something bigger than just fixing computers?
Well, that was a pivotal moment in my life, is when I decided to stop being the tech and start seeing this as a business, and made a lot of changes. It was just me, and then I decided to hire a salesperson that came on board back in 2014. My second employee was my wife. Typical of an MSP. I hear this story like every time I hear another MSP owner telling their story. I think 8 out of 10 MSPs started with the wife as well, doing the books, the finance and admin. That's basically it. I decided to go all in by, start hiring people. I think from day one, I realized that sales needed to happen. We needed to sell something to be able to support, to be an MSP, right? So I figured out that, I needed to invest in sales.
Definitely understand that. You said it yourself, you guys made the decision to walk away from a huge portion of residential clients to focus fully on business to business. Right. That's a scary move. That's a scary move when revenue's on the line, right? So what made you commit to that shift?
One of the benefits we had is that, again, I was young, no family, no kids. I think it was a lot easier for me to make that decision. I was blessed by starting so early in my career. If I was to do that all over again today, when I have 2 kids now, I have a mortgage, car payments, summer school to pay for, all of that stuff, I think it would be a different story. So when I started young, I was a lot more flexible. My financials were a lot more flexible. So we just decided to take a leap of faith, right? And paid out. It's definitely something that it would be a lot harder to do now. But if I was to do it again, I will just do it again, right?
Yeah, of course. You know, going back to those early years, how did it feel like emotionally going through it all?
Um, it, it's, I think going back, again, I started 15, 16 years ago. And
Yep.
in going back, it's funny because it doesn't change. The feeling doesn't change, right? I have a strong opinion about any business. Any business that's not growing is dying, basically, right? So we've been blessed that every year we've grown year over year, and we've grown in different areas, not necessarily top line revenue. There was a time in the business where we were growing top line revenue, but our EBITDA wasn't great. So we had about 2 years that we were, solely focused in our EBITDA, and that was all we
Yep.
did, like, finding ways to optimize the business, right? So we did that for about 2 years. So even though our top line was not growing, our EBITDA was growing, right? Then we took another probably year and a half to optimize our tools, the tools that we were using, to also optimize and standardize our stack.
Yep.
Optimize our processes, and what's funny about it is that you're always growing in different areas. If your business is stale and is not growing, then you have a style-like business, right? Which is, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But to answer your question, I guess that feeling doesn't change, right? If you're constantly changing, whatever you're doing now, it's going to change a year from now. And whatever you're doing now is not going to work a year from now if you're growing, right? So that feeling doesn't change. It's a roller coaster, right? You have your ups, you have your downs. It doesn't change. It's just at a different scale, different issues, but it doesn't change. The feeling is still there. It's always like, you wake up every morning, what issues are we going to face today? What are we going to solve today? Back then was maybe technical issues. I've been blessed that I have a great technical team now, a great security team, so I don't have to worry about now. I'll worry about those aspects of the business, but there are other things that we need to worry about, right?
Yeah, definitely. And like early on, did you ever question if the business was really going to scale?
I wonder that now. Like, it's always a constant grind. Again, I wake up every morning and how are we going to grow? I have this mentality that 1%, making everything 1% better every day, right? Not just on the business side, but on the personal side as well, right? Like what am I going to do today to make that 1% investment to make us better, right? Whatever that is, right? It's always a grind. I wake up every morning thinking, if I'm not out there networking, meeting people, thinking how I'm going to change, there's someone out there that's doing it.
Yeah.
And, and they're going to, so it's always a grind.
Yeah. And like one thing I think is really interesting about your story is that you didn't just rely on referrals and hope growth happened, right? You guys got intentional about a sales development, marketing, networking, and building an actual pipeline process, which honestly a lot of MSPs struggle with today, right? So at what point did you realize referrals alone weren't enough to scale the company?
Interesting question. So I think what happens, and what happened to us at least, I know every MSP grows a different way, every MSP owner has a different story, but what happened to us is that what I saw was typically companies or company owners of a certain size network with company owners of the same size. So to give you an example, like a company that's making $1 million with maybe 10 employees or 5 employees, whatever, that business owner is typically networking with, or their circle is businesses of that same size. So how do you break through to those businesses making $3 million, $5 million, $10 million is not within the same circle, because the referrals you're going to get from those clients are going to be this similar type of referrals. And that's the issue we saw, is like when we started, we were getting a lot of referrals, but we were getting a lot of referrals from the same size. So clients or companies that we were supporting that, let's say, were 5 people, 5 users or 10 users, we were getting a lot of 10 user referrals. So how do we scale and how do we get those 20 users, 30 users, 50 users, is by going out there and networking with those type of businesses. That's when we realized that if we really wanted to grow and raise the bar for us, we needed to get out there and create a system.
Yeah, of course. And like, what changed once you started building that system?
It takes time, right? It definitely takes time. Yeah. We're still constantly, like, we're still doing it now. Like it's a networking changes as well. Like during COVID, networking change. right? So we definitely needed to think outside the box. That's my role in the business, is getting out there, networking with people, and the networking is crazy, right? Because you can do, something that changed for me on the networking mentality is that before I was getting out there thinking I was going to go out there and meet that prospect every time I went out there to a networking event, and it was very it's not gratifying, right? Because you go out there, you meet 10 people, there might not be your prospect, but it eventually pays off, right? It's one of those things that it's like compound interest, right? You start meeting one person, that person introduces you to another person, that person, and then next thing you know is like the fifth level of introductions is the prospect that you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
But what changed was basically getting our name out there, getting to network at a different level, not just looking out there for the prospect or the perfect prospect, but to also network with people that when you need to refer somebody to some other type of service, like to give you an idea, we don't do websites, right? But I know 3 really good companies through my networking events that I go to that do websites. So when a client comes to me and says, hey, do you know anybody that does websites? I'm not referring them, or I'm not saying no. Maybe they go out there and find that MSP that also does websites, right? So I keep them within my circle. So I think that's what really changed, is and not expecting anything from anyone. Like, I'm not referring somebody expecting money or maybe a referral from them, but just making sure that our clients or my circle comes to me because they know I know somebody that's gonna good service for them, right?
Of course, yeah. Now, I understand that MSP sales cycles can take years, right? How do you keep a team motivated when deals move that slowly?
Interesting question, Kyle. So the reality is, sales at an MSP is a revolving door when it comes to employee selling. That's just the reality, right? We've been through so many, people. We hire people that come from different industries, and when you tell them how much money they can make selling MSP services, the first reaction is, I'm going to make a killing. I'm going to bring 3 leads a month. I'm going to bring 3 customers a month. I can do this because I've done it before. But the reality is that they underestimate the amount of effort that it takes, right? Because the reality is that MSP services, when you're selling MSP services, you're really selling something very close to the business, right? Like you're giving the MSP the keys to the kingdom, basically, right? So you really need to trust the MSP that you're going with. So keeping them motivated, it's one of the hardest things that we encounter when we have salespeople. Well, typically what we do is that we put them in peer groups, right? We've used 2 to 3 different peer groups. Go there not necessarily to learn to coach. That's one aspect, but also to hear success stories from other MSPs, right? Because when they come in, month 1 goes by, the second month goes by, they're not closing anything. They start getting, it's really hard to keep them motivated when they're on the phone or maybe they're out there networking and they're not bringing in the leads. But when you start meeting other salespeople in your peer group that have done it or are doing it and doing a good job, then you get motivated, right? So it's a constant reinforcement that it can work.
Yeah, of course. And like, what would you say, what have the SDRs, the BDRs have changed for KairosIT? What have they done for your company?
So, I mean, it's, first of all, besides top line revenue, I think what it really has helped us is create a structure for our, the type of PCP and ICP that we're looking to bring to the business. Not every prospect is a good lead, right? So when you're the business owner and you're doing sales, you know the gut feeling, right? Hey, this is going to be a perfect fit. But when you have somebody else out there selling for you, then you got to start thinking about the process. What is that process going to look like, right? Because if you're not careful, then you're going to be bringing in leads or prospects that are not a good fit, right? Yeah. The problem with the MSP is that we put so much effort into any new prospect that we bring. The onboarding for us takes anywhere from 60 to 90 days to really properly onboard a new client. Even if you charge for the onboarding or if you give it away for free, whatever the case may be. Yep. I feel like you're still losing money the first 3 months, right? Especially there's a lot of alignment that needs to happen between the time that you bring that new client to the time that you hand off that client from projects to your service desk or your support team. You're losing money, right? So you need to be careful with that, because if you're not bringing the right prospect, you're not bringing the right clients into your MSP, you're gonna end up losing money. So instead of 3 months, it might look like 6 months, it might look like 9, it might look like a year. And then if that prospect end up leaving, then it take a toll, right?
No, of course, I definitely understand that. And how much of growth today is truly based on consistency versus the talent that you guys have?
I don't necessarily have a number for that, right?
Yeah.
So I think consistency is key, but at the same time is reinventing. Like what worked 2 years ago in marketing and sales doesn't work now. So even if you keep it consistent, there's always something different that you need to do in today's age. Like AI, for example, right? AI is changing it's changing the industry, all the industries, right? Especially, I think AI for marketing and sales is definitely changing, right? So staying consistent, I think it's more about making sure that you are always, like, sales and marketing are always top of mind. Because the problem, we saw it during the merger, like we recently merged last year. And when you stop thinking about sales and marketing, it's really hard to start that, to start the engine again, right? It's not like you flip the switch and all of a sudden the leads just start coming in, right? So when you stop, it's gonna take anywhere from 6 to 9 months to start filling that pipeline again, right? So staying consistent is key, but at the same time, what you were doing 5 years ago may not work now, right?
Of course. Yeah, you got to be able to adapt, right? So you said it yourself, most MSPs owners never reach the stage where they can merge with another company or scale beyond a local operation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you guys recently went through a merger that expanded the business significantly, and that changes everything. So what made you realize that merger opportunity was the right move for you?
So I'm part of IT Nation. They have a specific program for M&A. It's called Grow. I think that has been I'm very big into peer groups. And I think they have transformed the way I run the business, the way I think about the business, also transformed the way I think personally of the business, and IT Nation Evolve has been a big part of that, right? I started going to Grow about 2 years ago, and I go there every quarter, and just little by little, I started like seeing the different aspects of M&A, right? When you think of M&A, you think of exiting the business, selling the business, right? But there's so many different things that you can do in M&A. Just started going there, started learning the opportunities, what it can do to a business when you have more, not necessarily revenue, but just a bigger scope, right? Bigger opportunities can definitely drive more revenue, can drive more maturity into the business.
Of course, yeah. And like both of your companies, right? Both of the merger and the other company, what did those have that complemented one another to build such a great organization to KairosIT today? Right.
So, well, one of the things is that I was blessed to be able to merge with my business partner now, Noah. He owned the MSP in Sonoma County, California. But we've been together in a peer group for 6 years. So we knew each other, right? So I think we were very lucky that we knew each other for such a long time. We work together in a peer group that comes, we jump on a call once a month for 2 hours and talk about issues that we have, employees, sales, marketing, just business in general. And something that we found is that every time maybe I had an issue with my business, he didn't have that issue, or anytime he was not complaining, but he mentioned any issues with his business, I didn't have that issue, right? So we just complement, like just naturally we complemented each other like that, right? And we just realized like, hey, what if we were, and again, going back to the IT Nation Grow is when I started going there, he wasn't going to IT Nation Grow, but when I started going there, I started thinking like, man, if I could solve this from 1 month to another, what would it do to my business? I'm sure I can solve it myself, right? But that's going to take years, right? A lot of effort, a lot of headaches, a lot of money. But if I can get this expertise that I'm lacking from somebody else, what would it do to my business, right? And that's just kind of like if, it just turned that light bulb, and I decided to present this to Noah. And I think it took us maybe 5-6 months to like sit down and write things down and figure it out. And then we decided to pull the trigger.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that for sure, Fernando. That's great for you and, your life basically. But did you have any fear going into that?
Of course.
Yeah, I'm wondering.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at the beginning, it's, I think I thrive on change. I like change. When things are getting stale in the business, I fear that if we're not changing, we're not evolving, then we're not moving forward. I think the business, when I owned the CompuLab, which was my MSP here in South Florida, I think it was great. We were growing, but it was getting a little too much of the same, right?
Yeah.
So I fear that. And then, of course, I went into the M&A conferences, and I was like, man, this sounds great. And of course, when you're thinking about the idea, it sounds great on paper. It sounds great when you're hearing about the success stories from other business owners or MSP owners that have merged, have sold, have purchased businesses. But when you're going through it, of course, there's a lot of fear, right? Especially my partner owned his business for 30 years, right? I owned my business for 15 years before we merged. So what to expect from your business, right? Jumping into a different business is completely different. That was one of the mistakes we made when we merged, is that we didn't see KairosIT as a new business. We saw it as a like, okay, we're gonna continue to do what we were doing. That was a big mistake we made, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a completely different business.
Interesting. And how did you guys go about that?
So lessons learned, a lot of I think one of the things we did is really, we took a step back, right? We took a step back and said, okay, we merge. We're thinking of what we're seeing now in KairosIT we're thinking of ourselves as, hey, this is the way we did it at the CompuLab or EIS Consulting. Let's continue to do it this way. And we were seeing a lot of issues there, right? So what we decided to do was just take a step back and start from scratch, right? Like we started thinking of ourselves as a startup, as a new business, creating new processes, creating new procedures, retraining our team, looking at all of the tools we have, and hey, the tool that we had before worked. Does it work for us now, or do we need to change the tool? Do we need to change the process? Do we need to change the technologies? And just really taking a step back and thinking of ourselves as a new business.
Of course. And do you think, what do you think most MSP owners misunderstand about actually scaling a company?
That's a loaded question, right? But because I think every business is different. Every MSP owner is different. So the MSP owner that's sales marketing, growth minded, has a different issue than the operator, right? The operator has a different issue. What I do think that most of us in this industry underestimate is the fact that everyone wants to grow, but once you start growing, we don't realize that when you grow 20%, 15 to 20%, 80% of your processes break. And that's a real challenge, right? Because everyone wants to grow, and hey, we grow, but then you also see that the operations side is suffering, right? So you got to keep that balance, and it's really hard to keep the balance. Like we want to grow, but at the same time, you got to grow your operations. So how do you do that? Like, how do you balance it? Right? Because if you grow operations, then you don't have the money to pay. But then if you grow too fast, then you got to make sure you have operations catching up to your sales, right? So it's a real challenge. And I think all of us in the end, unless you have a stable business where you're not necessarily growing, but just keeping it running, right? Which again, there's nothing wrong with that, but um, you introduce a lot of headaches to the business when you're growing fast and your operations are not catching up, right?
Yeah, I would assuming you have a lot of headaches sometimes. So, you have a team throughout the South Bay, Florida, Philippines, Colombia. What pressure comes with being responsible for 30, 40 employees that you guys have there all across the globe?
Yeah, that's interesting because again, it's one of those things that it comes with experience, right? So when my business partner Noah, he was always remote. We were in the office and we started going remote after COVID. I always liked the idea of having a remote team, and I always loved the idea of having people in different states. I think that adds a lot of personality to the business, having people in different states and different countries. I'm from Colombia myself, so I love to hire people in Colombia. And then we saw we were very heavy in Colombia, and we decided to diversify by moving into the Philippines. So, it's great. We have more diversity into the team. Again, we've been very lucky that our clients embrace that. I understand not, with the accent and stuff like that, not a lot of businesses out there, depending on the area, are open to that. But we've been very lucky that our clients embrace and like the fact that we have different accents and diversity in our team. But something we don't realize is the complexity from an HR perspective that it brings to the business, right? It brings real challenges. It brings, taxes, payroll and different laws. And, it's hiring somebody in California versus Florida is completely different. So again, if the idea sounds great on paper or the idea, but once you start doing it, it's like, oh my God, I didn't realize these different things, right? So again, it's a learning curve. We have been very lucky again that we merged with a company that was located in California. So we're now just adopting all of the processes they had in California, because I think if we can do business in California, we can do business anywhere in the state.
You're definitely right there, and I love that. And I want to shift it into the MSP industry, right? Because it feels very different than it did 5 years ago, right? AI, cybersecurity, private equity money, everything is moving fast. But what excites you about the MSP space right now?
I think it's the opportunity of AI, right? A lot of people are afraid or stressed out about AI. I see it as another jump that we got to make, right? Another curve jump that we got to make into our businesses. Like when cloud computing came out, right? Like everyone's freaked out because, how are we going to charge now? Things of that nature. I see it as an opportunity. I also see it as an opportunity for people that are entering the MSP world, that are looking to start their own MSP. I see it as a huge opportunity. I think it simplifies things, right? I think it makes things a lot more simple. And when there's complexity in any business, it's a lot harder to do business, right? To do stuff, right? So I think AI is going to make things a lot more simple for everyone, both the clients, MSP owners, the employees at MSPs, right? Or just in reality, anyone that's looking to start an MSP or any business for that matter.
Yeah, of course. And I'm assuming you have clients that have concerns all the time. So what do you tell them in an industry that is heading somewhere completely different than it did a couple of years ago?
I mean, every client that we have right now, we're having conversations around AI. We have those clients that are looking to install open cloud in all of their machines and have agents running their business. And we have some other clients that are afraid to even use Copilot, right?
Yeah.
So we're having conversations with our clients around AI and really trying to figure out what that. I don't think any MSP out there knows what the AI offering is going to be from an MSP perspective. I think all of us are trying to figure it out. This is the primary subject that we talk about in our peer groups. Is like, what kind of offer are we going to have as an MSP? Right now, for us, we're very focused on AI governance and security for our clients. We're playing around with the idea of bringing AI automation to them as a service, right? So we're playing around with that idea. But for us right now, it's all about understanding our clients' needs. Is the client more, is the company more concerned about the privacy and security, or are they more concerned about being an innovator and being able to get out there and have that competitive advantage, right? So understanding that is what we're trying to do to see how we can help those clients.
Yeah, of course. And Where do you think most MSPs are falling behind right now, or going ahead, maybe you would say?
Oh man, that's an interesting question. I mean, if you would ask me, and again, I talk to a lot of MSPs
Yeah.
from my peer groups, from other MSPs that I know, and it's they're in the different spectrums, right? Like we have those MSPs that are saying, I'm not touching it, right? I'm all about security. I'm blocking it. I'm not letting any employees use AI at all. And we see those other MSPs that are embracing it, are, at the forefront of AI, using it internally, using it for their clients as well. I don't know. Like I think that nobody really knows right now. Nobody knows. So it's really hard to answer that question because, again, for those MSPs that are embracing AI, are using AI internally for their clients, next thing that can happen is one of those clients get breached, or they get breached because of AI, and then the guys on the other side are going to say, you see, I told you so. Or the other way around, maybe nothing happens, they do it on a secure manner, secure way, and they take off, and then they're going to be looking at those that didn't embrace it, saying, you see, I told you so, right? So like, I feel like really nobody knows. All of MSPs are trying to figure it out right now.
Yeah, of course, definitely understand that. And what advice would you give to MSP owners trying to build, like a predictable pipeline today?
I think it's understanding your market, understanding the how you sell in South Florida is different, and that's something that I'm realizing now. Is like, the way I sell, or the marketing I do in South Florida is completely different than the marketing I have to do in North Carolina, in California, right? The sales cycle, the people you're selling to are completely different, right? So understanding your market. Some of the other things is, we were hiring salespeople or people on the phone, SDRs, different states, different countries, and it works. But hiring somebody within your market changes the game, right? Because they understand the market, they can relate to those prospects. Right. So I feel like whatever you're going to do is stay consistent, because what I see a lot of MSPs do is they implement any type of marketing, or they go to one networking event and they don't get a lead. And then they come back and say, you see, networking doesn't work. Or they make 100 phone calls one day and they say, you know what, I didn't get a lead. You know what, cold calling doesn't work. Or they do one post in social media and they come back and they say, you know what, social media doesn't work. I think for us, what we have been embracing lately is just doing small amounts of everything. Like you gotta stay visible to those prospects, right? Because you don't know which route they're gonna come, right? So definitely understanding your market and being where those prospects are.
Of course, you said it yourself. You got to do the touch points, right? How do you guys go about, someone tells you, this is not the right time, follow up in 3 months. How do you guys go about that type of sales process?
We have had about 2 clients now that have told us no 3 times. We have actually presented to them, like we've done presentations, and they've told us no twice or 3 times. Two clients that are, one is about $13,000 of MRR, the other one's about $9,000 of MRR. So, good sized clients for us. Yeah. One of them, I remember meeting them probably 5 years ago. They told us no. We stay in touch. We continue to call them once in a while. I continue to send them an email, personal email, once in a while. We presented again. They say no. And then the third time, we got in, right? So what I like to tell my salespeople and what I like to hear is when they say no, it's not right now, right?
Yep.
Right now might not work, but you never know. Like I was actually on the phone before this call, and I was talking to a prospect where we were doing an assessment, and we're doing the assessment with the CTO of the company, and we've been doing that assessment now. We've been in touch with them for about a year before we actually got in to do the assessment. He jumps on the phone and he says, hey, the CTO just quit. So it changes the deal, right? Like we were doing an assessment, hoping to get co-managed. The CTO is no longer there. It just opens up the door, right? So again, staying consistent, staying in front. And again, the fact that they're not ready yet, it doesn't mean that they will never be ready. And I think a lot of people appreciate you staying consistent. You know what I'm saying? Being professional, not just, sending garbage, but, staying consistent and staying persistent. I think people appreciate that.
Yeah, and everyone, at the end of the day, you're building a relationship. That's the whole point of having that. So,
and everyone is in business, right? At the end of the day, everyone is in business. Everyone is, so they understand that as long as you're doing it respectfully, right, and you're not necessarily like overdoing it, right? So understanding that, I think it's key.
Yeah, man, I'm loving the way you guys are running it over there at Kairos. But this is how we end out the pod, right? We go with 2 questions, back to back. You go back to the version of yourself that was just starting out, fixing computers, trying to get clients, trying to figure out everything. What advice would you give that younger version of Fernando? And what advice would you give to the next generation of MSP owners trying to build something meaningful today?
All right. So number 1 would be a consistency. I mean, we were just talking about that, right? Consistency. I think I wasted a lot of time at the beginning, trying different things and not being consistent. I did a lot of networking at the beginning. When I say a lot of networking, I mean, I went to maybe 10 networking events.
Yeah.
It didn't work. Social media, it didn't work. We tried way too many things, but we never did it for more than, let's say, 6 months. That was a huge mistake, right? I remember I was doing a lot of networking and I stopped doing it. And all of a sudden, like after I stopped going to networking events, I received 2 leads, like 3 months after I stopped networking. And I was like, that is going on, right? So I think being consistent on everything you do, right? Like, especially for growing your business, sales and marketing, staying consistent, being visible. Like the fact that you're behind the scenes doesn't help the business. Like you got to get out there. Like you have to get out there, whatever it is. People say BNI doesn't work. It didn't work for us, but I know a lot of MSPs that have grown their business by BNI. People say cold calling doesn't work. I know a lot of MSPs that have grown by cold calling. PPC doesn't work. I know a lot of MSPs that have done great with PPC. So I think staying consistent on whatever you do, it's key. And then the second question about what would you tell somebody that's starting their own MSP? I think is what is working, like take advice from people that have done it. I think that's key. That's huge. But also, whatever's working now might not work in 5 years, 2 years, especially now in AI. So of course, hear that advice, but at the same time, think outside the box. Like I think one of the biggest benefits people have when they're not in the industry is that they're coming in with a fresh mind, especially younger people. They're coming in with a fresh mind. Yeah. They're also selling to those younger generation of business owners. Like, the days of sending, sitting down with the prospect, signing the paper, the MSA, like that doesn't work anymore. So how do you reinvent the wheel? Like how do you see yourself different? Like how can they see you different than the other MSPs? I think that's key, right? So especially when you're coming in new, you come with a fresh perspective, right? Every time we're having a business challenge and we're sitting in a table, typically the person that resolves that business challenge is a person that doesn't understand the MSP world. It's insane, right? Like and again, I present to a lot of peer groups that have no idea of MSP, but when I'm presenting my business issues or any issue that I have, is typically get more feedback from those business owners that are not in the industry. So I don't know if that even makes sense, right? Because I feel like people that are coming in new have a huge advantage versus those of us that have been I know it sounds weird, but because we've been in the business so long, we think the way we're doing it now is going to work, especially now with AI. You know what I'm saying? Like we have that experience, we have that expertise, but I feel like now the younger generation of people that are coming in with a fresh mind can think outside the box and can see opportunities that a lot of MSP owners like ourselves might miss because we're so used to doing it such a way. Of course.
Now I could definitely understand where you're coming from there. So that's the tip. Think outside the box right there.
I think so, yeah.
All right, good. I love it. Well, Fernando, once again, thank you very much for being here today. I'm really excited to see what KairosIT is continuing to build. And I really thank you very much for telling your story and you know what it actually takes to build an MSP today. So I just want to say thank you very much for being here. And it's really a pleasure to have you on, man.
Thank you, Kyle, for your time. I appreciate it.
Of course, my man.